they have a very long established plan to implement systems of control, poison our food, and every day they are working to sort of limit our freedoms and create control systems, surveillance systems. But I believe that it's too far gone. It's been too infiltrated. It's been too hijacked by these nefarious, very wealthy entities. Be prepared for when this system collapses and have some sort of alternative, because if not, they're going to implement their system.
Hi and welcome to the Resistance podcast. I'm Emma Dunwell, and today with me I have Nacho, who is the founder of StandUp X. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are?
Thank you for having me firstly. My name is Nacho. I founded StandUp X on May 2nd, 2020. It was in response to the lockdown measures, the infringements on our rights that we faced. It was in the midst of the first lockdown, and it was a group founded in order to uphold the freedoms that we are supposed to have in this country. So we basically started protesting against a lot of the measures in defiance of the restrictions on our fundamental freedoms. And we've played a massive part in the freedom movement, I would say originating it and pioneering it on May the 2nd, 2020. That was the first freedom protest that we know about in the UK in opposition to the lockdown measures. And we played a massive part in building the momentum for the large freedom rallies that we then had about a year later. A lot of people maybe have attended those large freedom rallies that saw hundreds of thousands of people descend on London in the name of freedom, but they may not know quite the origin story of how we built those numbers. It wasn't just randomly there was hundreds of thousands of people. There was a lot of work that went into building that momentum, and that's I have quite a unique story and a comprehensive timeline of the freedom movement's journey and progression.
So could you tell us a little bit more about that? Because obviously within the lockdown, everyone, the majority of the population had kind of just accepted what the government was telling them, just kind of accepted the fact that, okay, global pandemic, lockdown, mask up, get vaccinated, makes sense. Because obviously there would have been a lot of pushback. Was that your main obstacle?
I knew from when they began locking us down that there were many people out there that didn't buy the government's narrative. And my goal was to try and connect and unite the people who weren't buying what the government was telling us. And if we just look at events such as Event 201, which was a simulation exercise ran 6 weeks before the first case of COVID was officially declared, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the World Health Organization, they ran a simulation training exercise 6 weeks before the first case of COVID as to how they would respond if there was to be a coronavirus pandemic. So they sort of revealed their plans, and I would say it was a deliberate event. The whole pandemic was a deliberate, constructed, manufactured crisis in order to further a nefarious agenda 2030, the Great Reset. And it was a compliance exercise to test how easily people would sacrifice their civil liberties and sort of begin conditioning people to be accepting of more draconian systems, and be accepting of governments imposing on their basic rights, and even going as far as telling people what they need to inject into their body in order to participate in society. So there was a lot of pushback from people who weren't aware of what was going on. And it was a gradual build up. So firstly, when we began protesting on May the 2nd, 2020, there was about 20 of us, 20 individuals who'd never met before. We just found each other from a random Facebook group. We had no idea how many people were going to show up on that day. We were in a Facebook group with probably tens of thousands of people. So I showed up on that day. And I had a megaphone in my bag. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how many people were going to be there. and there was around 20 or so people there. And that was the inception of StandUp X, because we basically created a WhatsApp group, and we decided as a collective that we were going to continue protesting. Every week we would organize protests all across London. We devised leaflets, and we went out and done a lot of public outreach, is what we call it in the freedom movement, where we engage with members of the public. We try and bring them the information and present them the facts about what's occurring and the dangers of conforming and acquiescing to what the government was imposing at the time. So it was a gradual build-up. Every week the numbers grew. So we went from 20, the next week we had 30, next few weeks we had a few hundred. And eventually, a year later, we had hundreds of thousands of people marching on the streets of London.
The latest thing that's blowing up everywhere is the Bovea, I believe is how you pronounce it. I call it the methane vaccine. Do you want to tell our viewers a little bit about that and your thoughts on it?
Our foods are very poisoned. There's a lot of GMO foods. The system, the food industry doesn't have our best interest at heart when it comes to producing healthy foods for us. And anyone who does the slightest bit of research would understand the problems with the how much they're impacting on the nutritional content of food by using pesticides or GMO crops. And the latest version, or one of the branches of that sort of industry, is this new chemical Bovea, which is being sold as a means to reduce how much methane cows produce, but there's no long-term data on how this impacts on the cow's health, and in turn, how it impacts the milk that we're then consuming. There also has been no transparency about their Tesco, and I think it's Aldi and Morrison's, including Bovea in their milk products. I think Arla is the largest dairy manufacturer in the UK, and they are using Bovea without notifying the public or the consumers. I don't quite know how it's come to light or it's been revealed that they're including this, but obviously, rightly so, there's a lot of outrage and concern with them using experimental chemicals in our food produce. I think if we just make a comparison to the COVID vaccine, for example, we can start to learn that they treat us as guinea pigs, and the masses are just treated as mere cattle to the establishment and the people who hold the real power, institutions such as the World Health Organization. Yes. The World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, they have a very long established plan to implement systems of control, poison our food, and every day they are working to sort of limit our freedoms and create control systems, surveillance systems, poisoning our food and such.
Because the scary thing is how obviously they're doing it. The government is very quick to promote products like Arla and all these weird genetically modified foods, and then they're very quick to smear and slander pure foods, such as the whole raw milk thing that's going on, especially that's becoming more prevalent, as you said, with Bovea. And it's all very much ties into what you say about Agenda 2030. Obviously, Bill Gates is heavily involved in that. It's heavily involved in the vaccines. What would be your advice to people to, because obviously being aware of it is one thing, avoiding it and trying to avoid all these toxic products is another thing, and it can be increasingly difficult.
It can be a minefield. I think the first thing you need to do is conduct research and be very wary of where you're purchasing your food from, what you're consuming, and being conscious of the nutritional profiles of foods. Personally, I'm plant-based, so I've been plant-based for the last 7 years. I feel in the freedom movement, what I've come to learn is that people either take one of two routes when they start researching into nutrition. They either go down the plant-based route, which is sort of alkaline, acidic, comparison, where our bodies are supposed to be in an alkaline state, and majority of foods that we consume, especially in the Western world, are acidic forming, which have a negative impact on our health, whereas a more plant-based approach dependent more on fruits and vegetables and grains, is alkaline forming. I started research, basically do your research about nutrition and make the decision that's right for you. One way that you can sort of be less exposed to a lot of the toxins that they include in our foods is shopping more locally, shopping with your local farm markets instead of going to the large corporations like your Tesco's and Sainsbury's or Amazon Fresh, God forbid. So just be conscious of what you're eating and do research into what you're consuming. And I started doing research into these topics when I was very young. When I was 16 years old, this world sort of began to unravel, and the lies and deception that we are implanted with from an early age just began to be exposed. For whatever reason, I had like a spiritual awakening at that age, and I started to research into various topics. The first topic that I actually started to look into was common law. That then led me to nutrition, that then led me to 9/11, that then led me to Bilderberg, that then led me to the banking system. And it was just topic after topic that was light bulb after light bulb. And I began to see the world for how it really operated. But one thing, especially in this modern day, that we should be very conscious of is the food that we're consuming. It's more important than ever to be healthy. And with all of the toxins that we're exposed to through the chemtrails or the poisons in our food or the vaccines that they inject into us as babies, if you look at the increase in the amount of vaccines that they give to a newborn, back 40, 30 years ago, it was like 10. Now it's like, I don't know how many, but it's increased like 30, 40. It's ridiculous. If you look at vaccine ingredients, they're the most toxic substances on the planet: mercury, formaldehyde, aluminium. Just do research what you're putting into your body, whether it's what you're consuming or what you're injecting into. Just for goodness sake, do a bit of research and don't rely on what they tell you. Don't rely on what your doctor tells you. Don't rely on what the mainstream tells you, because they are all owned by the same corporations, by the same entities, by the same 1% who have a vested interest in poisoning you and constructing a very bleak future for all of society.
When we go on to this kind of topic about elite societies, controlling sort of global events and the global direction of things, we get to this area of a concept that I find fascinating about the fact that competition is just all an illusion. It doesn't exist. It's like you've got Nike versus Adidas, all owned by the same company. BlackRock, and you've got all of these political figures, and they're not friends, and they're supposed to hate each other because they have opposing views and everything like that. And then you see them and they're shaking hands and they're laughing together. Do you think that there is any political party in our upcoming in our country that you would consider voting for?
I think it's the illusion of choice. I personally don't feel that the political system is the right route to remedy. I think that when the political system in this country was started, they had great intentions, and this country is the bedrock of modern democracy and the foundation of human rights. But I believe that it's too far gone. It's been too infiltrated. It's been too hijacked by these very wealthy entities. And if you just look at COVID and how much power the unelected institution, private unelected institution, the World Health Organization had over governments across the world, it goes to show that our government really doesn't represent what the average person wants. They are working for the interests of these wealthy 1% organizations. So I personally don't feel that the route to remedy is through the political system. Where my mind is at is that we should be trying to construct our own version of democracy and start our own new system, modernized democracy. I think democracy is outdated. It's not the political system here, rather, shall I say, is outdated. I don't think it no longer represents the average individual in this modern world. I do a lot of public outreach where I go and engage with people and I ask them what they think of the government, what they think of the political system. And a large proportion of people don't have any trust in the political system. A large proportion of people that I interact with know that the government don't have their best interest and know that the government isn't leading society in the best ways. But what they feel is there's no alternative. There's this feeling of hopelessness or of being powerless. A very common response that I hear from people is, well, what can I do? We're so consumed by our own lives. We're kept so distracted with our own being in the rat race and trying to pay our bills, and we don't have an alternative. It's either vote for this person or vote for this person. We don't have any meaningful alternative to the political system. That's where I think the freedom movement should come in and start creating our own versions of democracy. And I've attempted to do that. I'm in the midst of creating something that I have titled the People's Platform. We have a wealth of resources, a vast network within the freedom movement of people from every walk of life that you can imagine, from doctors to construction workers to your average mom, the most diverse selection of individuals you can find from every walk of life, every background, every age. That is the beauty of the freedom movement. We have representatives from every cohort of society. And I think if we manage to begin organizing the freedom movement in a more meaningful way, then we can begin creating an alternative system for humanity. If we look at the large freedom protest, we had hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, who were organized enough, who gave us a glimpse of what humanity can achieve when they work together. We had hundreds of thousands of people marching in the name of freedom. These events were organized by 6 or so people. This should be an inspirational story for all of us that shows what we can achieve when we stand together. If we manage to organize those hundreds of thousands of people in a more meaningful way and sustain that contribution that everyone was willing to make a very small contribution to freedom by saying, I will be in attendance at that freedom rally. For that one day, I will leave my house and I will march with these people. That's the contribution that people were willing to make. If we can evolve that and create a forum separate to like a traditional march where those people can contribute in a simple way and they feel counted and equal. Everyone was equal on those days. Everyone was there as a fellow human in the name of freedom. Everyone was had this tunnel vision, sort of working towards the same goal. If we can evolve that and create a forum separate to a traditional march where we may have an official event where we advertise it to individuals who are interested in freedom and everyone is given an opportunity to present their contribution, create a sort of people's proclamation of sorts, and we sustain a system that allows a collective input, then I think we can start creating an alternative system.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, because I think that standing together and uniting people in the freedom movement, and you know what, uniting people outside of the freedom movement as well, is the most important thing. Because while we're all divided amongst left, right, Israel, Palestine, classes, and there's so many things that divide us, so many things, and the elites just keep giving us more. It's just like, oh, you have to dislike each other if they say this now. You can't agree on this now. And we just keep eating it up. We keep eating it up. We keep dividing ourselves. The whole time, they're up there and they're like this. And they are banded together in a brotherhood and they've got each other's backs. I mean, you only need to look so far as the Labour Party, all the donations that they got from Lord Ali, all the freebie scandals, even being talked about on mainstream news that somewhat later on started working as a propaganda machine for them. And when you know that that's happening on a national scale, you know that that's happening on a global scale. And then this is where we've got to have the global reach that the elites have to unite people in the same way. But the people that are so kind of asleep to it, wrapped up in their own bubbles, as you say, you know, they've got so many distractions plonked in front of them. Do you think that there is something coming, or do you think that there is anything that would be able to wake these people up to it properly?
I've sort of pivoted my approach in terms of before, when we were in the midst of lockdown and there were these blatant attacks on our freedom that everyone was aware of, it was a lot easier to present information to people who were asleep or not aware of what was going on, because we could very easily reference the current situation. Well, you're being told when you can leave your house, where you're being told what you need to inject into your body. Well, these are the facts. It was very easy to reference that and describe the issues with that. We're in a very different scenario right now, because there are no blatant attacks on our freedom currently. We, as people who have done the research and, you know, awake, realize that the agenda accelerates and continues, but it's very difficult presenting that information to the average person. And where I've sort of pivoted is, instead of presenting the average person all this information and trying to break down, I mean, understanding what's going on in the world right now, it's a very complex conversation to have. And there's a lot of topics that you need to reference, you know. We can title it all and compact it all under certain terms, such as the Great Reset or Agenda 2030, but then trying to unpick that and have a conversation with someone on the street about that is very
that's where
difficult.
It gets really difficult, because I mean, if you say Agenda 2030 or if you say Bill Gates, instantly a list of things comes up in my mind. But I mean, I'll give you an example. My mom, since I've been working with Resistance GB, it's all she can talk about to my family. And my auntie, she didn't even know what the pro-Palestine marches were. She didn't even know that there was a war going on in the middle. I mean, there's always a war going on in the Middle East, but she didn't know about everything that's going on between Israel and Palestine at the moment. And then I realized that all she watches is Love Island, Love is Blind, and it's just to a certain extent, it's hard not to feel hopeless with these types of things, because it's like, it's willful ignorance. It's not just ignorance, it's willful. They want to be ignorant.
What I think we need to start doing is, instead of presenting and bombarding people who aren't aware of what's going on with information, what I've started doing is initiating conversations by asking them sort of open-end questions. So I began doing some public surveys, and before I kind of disclose what my position is, or before I hand them a leaflet with all this information, I ask them what they think of society at the moment, or where they believe society is heading, or whether they trust the government, or whether those are, you know, the first 3 points that are a great start. And what I've learned is that it immediately builds a much better rapport and sort of a two-channel exchange, rather than me just going up to someone, here's a leaflet, have you heard about Agenda 2030? Well, you're being enslaved at the moment, did you take the vaccine? You know, it's like, people don't respond to that, and people are so stressed out already that the last thing that they want to do, so we do something called tube outreach, where we get on a busy train in the midst of rush hour, and we do like a speech, and when we present them people leaflets, and people are stressed. People have had a long day, they're in a hectic environment, all they want to do is go home and relax and probably switch off and distract themselves by watching these shows that you spoke about. People don't want to be bombarded with even more stressful topics, and here is us alerting them of this massive danger that is upon them. People don't generally respond very well to that. And I don't think someone who is not awake is ever really going to be that receptive to that approach. What they may be more receptive to is asking them, before you say anything, what do you think? People are so, like I was saying earlier, people are so distrustful and of the current political system. And I feel people don't believe that their voice counts or matters anymore. And when you have someone on randomly interacting with you and asking you what you think about these like major societal issues or what they think of the world, a lot of people have an opinion. It's just that a lot of people don't get an opportunity to present their opinion on camera, or they may have these conversations, a lot of people have very mundane conversations about weather and small talk, and it's like we are yearning as a society, I think, for human connection. I think we are yearning for a more fairer system, and that isn't, people know that that's not the democratic system at the moment, doesn't represent those values. What they don't have is an alternative. So yeah, like I say, it's about us constructing an alternative system, and allowing people who maybe aren't aware to express what their views are before we present so much information to them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know what, I struggle referring to our current government as a democratic system, because it really doesn't feel that way. And
well, it's not.
People look at the Labour government and all they see is tyrannical, authoritarian, fascist measures. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. They are putting a damp on free speech. You can say what you want about it, but we have political prisoners. We have violent criminals being let out in their thousands multiple times. It was not just 1,700, that was the first story to break out, but there have been loads more since then. And then we have people getting arrested for 9 months, 18 months or whatever for something that they've put out on X, or something that they've put out on YouTube, or something that they've put out on Facebook. And these are real people who don't actually have a responsibility to the public eye. So these are just your average people who have gone on Facebook, seen a post and posted their opinion. And then we have people that are actually have a responsibility to the public, in the public eye. They have a responsibility to really think about what they say. And then we have wavering opinions. I mean, it's like, one of the main things that's dividing people at the moment is what's going on in the Middle East. How many times has Keir Starmer given a pro-Palestinian speech? And then how many times has he given a pro-Israel speech? It's waivers on every single thing. And it's all just a game of division. But then if you have anyone else doing it, that's it. Hurty words, jail.
Yes, I mean, we've seen the erosion of our civil liberties and fundamental freedoms that this country pioneered. And if you look at the British Constitution, we have certain inalienable rights that are supposed to stand in perpetuity for the citizens of this country. We're supposed to have freedom of movement. We're supposed to have freedom of speech, freedom of expression, the right to protest, and the right to petition the government or the monarchy if the public doesn't agree with how they're managing certain affairs. And what we've seen is that government no longer consult people. I don't believe in, all these petitions that you see on the official government. I don't think they count for anything. I don't think, no matter what conversation is had in Parliament, that it's going to make a significant change. Anyone who speaks out against the system and is within the Parliament, such as Andrew Bridgen, will very quickly get removed. Anyone who is working for the interests of the people will very quickly be exiled and demonized and targeted, as you've seen happen with Andrew Bridgen. So what we're facing right now is the continual erosion of our fundamental rights. And the more the average person is unaware of this, the bleaker the future is going to be for them. But we do have a freedom movement in the UK. We have an inspirational story and history of us standing for liberty here in the UK just in the last few years. If you were in attendance at these large freedom rallies, we were invincible. We're unstoppable when we stand together. I've seen a glimpse of what we can achieve. What we didn't do is capitalize on those large numbers that we had, but it at least shows us that we're out there. It at least shows us how many of us there are. And if we manage to get our act together and really learn to create some sort of system, some sort of function of true unification, we have such a diverse selection of brands and established notable figures within the movement I could name you 10 just off the top of my head, from Resistance GB to StandUp X to Together to Save Our Rights to people like Ramis we just have such a wealth of contributors and well-established brands, people like Hope Sussex, The Light Paper, Stand in the Park. There's all these different initiatives and projects, Free Humanity. I'm just wheeling off all of the brands that are within the freedom movement, and we need to learn to create a means of us all working sort of loosely together, but remaining independent brands. And that's what I would like to see happen with the People's Platform, because that's where the movement is missing the next step. And if we learn to do that, and someone comes along and develops a means of unifying this wealth of initiatives and projects, then I think we have a real fighting chance, more than a fighting chance. I think we can collapse this current system.
Well, I was going to ask you, where do you kind of see all this going? Because a lot of people would say that they are seeing this lead to a civil war, a revolution of some kind. People usually seem to have the outtake that it will end violently with some kind of uprising when people suddenly decide that they simply can't take anymore. I am hopeful that instead what will happen is people will create communities and, as you said, create our own systems. I'm seeing a lot of people, like for instance, everything that's going on with the inheritance tax. People are putting their assets into silver and gold to avoid it. A lot of people are waking up to the measures in their own house. So for instance, fluoride in the water, people are getting water filters. People are buying their own land. People are growing their own food, their own veg. Do you think, or do you hope that the freedom movement will band together and create some kind of community where we can go and live away from all this elite nonsense and all this Agenda 2030? Or do you think that that's just too far-fetched and too difficult to kind of get to that level of organization?
I wouldn't describe it as us all sort of creating a community where we all live together and like live outside of this system.
Yeah, no.
But we need to create some sort of function that allows all of the different projects and initiatives in the movement to have a system of democratic input where we all vote on matters, where we all have a voice. Like I said, for the People's Platform, anyone who attends has an opportunity to present a 5-minute segment, a 5-minute contribution. Everyone has that same route to contribution. So everyone is considered equal and put in a parallel way. We need to create a simple means of us as a movement contributing, voting, having events that we attend regularly. That's where we begin to then consider what the means of remedy is for the larger situation. So the system and the government and the mainstream media are pushing people to be angered and outraged, and they're dividing us constantly, and they want the same thing that we probably want, or the same thing that I want currently, is for this system is going to collapse. Like, I think they're priming it and they're creating scandal after scandal. Things like the immigration issues, the economic situation, the scandals with Boris Johnson and Partygate. They have deliberately created scandal after scandal to discredit this current system because they want it to collapse. What they want after is a worse system. And that's where we need to come in, and we as a freedom movement and as humanity need to be prepared for when this system collapses and have some sort of alternative, because if not, they're going to implement their system, which is going to be a lot worse.
So this new system, do you think that that's cryptocurrency?
Cryptocurrency is the financial aspect to it.
No. There's a lot of people that think that once we're on crypto, they can track everything because everything will be digital and it all gets very dystopian.
Financially, crypto is going to evolve the financial system, but as we see with the powers that be, they are going to hijack the latest technology to implement means of controlling us. So I don't see crypto as a bad thing innately. I see the powers that be and the wealthiest corporations at the helm of the innovation of cryptocurrency to hijack it and harness it for suppressive purposes. So that the financial system is going to go towards crypto. What I would say to us as freedom people is to protect cash, because without cash, that is one of the last remnants of our freedom that we have. And it really is a barrier between a very dystopian system and our freedom. So we need to protect cash at all costs. And as you see, they're constantly pushing towards a cashless system. That's just the financial element, but they're going to destabilize and destroy everything from the NHS to the government to getting rid of people having their own vehicle ownership. Like Klaus Schwab said, his plan, and this is what it astounds me that the average person. So we done some public outreach the other day on the train, and we had a picture of Klaus Schwab. And I think to us in the movement, and to us who sort of surround ourselves mainly with people who are aware of what we're talking about, it can be easy to become ignorant of what the average person's knowledge about these topics are, because to us Klaus Schwab is such a household name type thing. Everyone knows who Klaus Schwab is. Everyone knows who the World Economic Forum is in our circle. The average person on the street has no idea who Klaus Schwab is. I was shocked. They have no idea how much power these people hold and their plans for their future. The Klaus Schwab is literally telling society that they're going to own nothing and be happy. That's the sort of future that they have in store for humanity if we don't get our act together and quickly.
It's hard not to become like the environmentalists, thinking that they're going to burn to death sometime in the next 2 years. How do you avoid veering off into sensationalism?
As individuals who are aware of the reality at the moment and the danger that we as a global society find ourselves in, there's two sides in the world right now. There's the 1% and everyone else. It's so important that those who are aware of what's occurring remain courageous, remain high-spirited, remain optimistic, and don't give in to their fear. Don't allow them to take the one thing that they have no control over. They have no control over your mindset. You have complete autonomy over what you think, over how courageous you are. That's completely up to you as an individual. And they're doing their best to incite panic and incite fear. But the message is don't allow them to do that, because we also have an inspirational story. The way I kind of reference the fact that we've had hundreds of thousands of people on the streets, and that started with 20 people. A year later, there was hundreds of thousands of us. And just knowing how many of us there are out there will give you a sense of collective power, and we're unstoppable in those masses. That to the system, that does concern them. Having hundreds of thousands of people that organized to march in harmony and unity, that concerns them. So just remember the power you have as an individual. Your voice, your spirit is formidable just because you're a human. We have a divine purpose. We are created in the spirit of our creator, and it's our duty, it's our responsibility to ourselves and to our future to uphold the values of truth, freedom, and liberty. And anyone who's contributed to this movement in any way, anyone who has learned what is occurring right now, you have a massive role to play, and you are responsible for the type of future that your children are going to look forward to and that future generations are going to have. So remember that you have a massive duty, and hopefully you can live up to that.
So obviously, I mean, you have to be passionate, but obviously you're very passionate. You're 26 now, I believe, is that
29.
right? Oh, you're 29, are you? Okay, so you said you kind of woke up to all of this stuff when you were 16, was it? So that's quite young. What was there a single defining moment that kind of made you switch on, or was it gradual things? What was the major turning point?
So I'll go back a little bit to me coming to this country, because I'm originally Colombian and I came here to England when I was 2 years old.
So quite young then.
Yes, it wasn't obviously. My mother made the decision to come here, and the reason she came here, and she left three of her children back in Colombia, my half siblings. So the reason I'm saying this is my mother made a lot of sacrifice to get us to this country, because she wanted, the typical immigrant story. She wanted a better life for myself, and for hopefully I would be able to sort of improve the mainly economic state of my family back home. She just wanted a better life. But the reason I touch on this is because Colombians are very proud of our country. We have an amazing culture. We have a naturally beautiful country. We're extremely attached to our culture, identity, and our land. But we were willing to sacrifice all of that, and a lot of people are. We were willing to sacrifice that to come here. Why? Because this country offered something that Colombia doesn't have. Colombia doesn't have economic, well, it's improving now, but at the time didn't particularly have economic prosperity. It didn't have stability. It didn't have true democracy, which this country did offer. Yeah, it did offer that. That was the whole selling point. That's the reason England is so great. That's the reason it's the financial headquarters of the world. This country is the foundation of modern democracy and modern civil liberties, and that it's being eroded every single day. So I have quite a unique appreciation for the values of this country. And as I've grown up as a Londoner, I am a Londoner, but I also have my Colombian identity, and I have a really unique appreciation for the values and the opportunities that this country offered, and the sacrifices that my family made to get me to that point. So that's why I'm even more passionate about defending this country and the civil liberties that we have, because we made such a sacrifice to come here. I'm a product of this system. My mother doesn't speak English, so everything that I've learned, my mom touched on bits of information, such as like maybe the Vatican not being the most well-intentioned of entities and things like that, and she was more biblically focused, Revelations, Mark of the Beast. She kind of touched on these topics when I was younger. I'm a product of this system. I've come through the school system. I know every aspect of the system, from the housing system. I grew up on a council estate, and I have a unique appreciation for the culture here, and I don't want it to be eroded. I'm fighting desperately to protect the values of London and England.
Well, yeah, as everyone in this country should be, in my eyes. I mean, I think it's interesting how you talked about the pride that Colombians have for their country, as anyone should have for their own country. But when we get to British people or American people, or any white person, if you have pride for your country, most of the time you are considered a racist. Same with Christian values. This country is built on Christian values. Whether you're a Christian or not, 9 times out of 10, your average person, your average Brit will agree with, love thy neighbor, treat people how you want to be treated, kindness, generosity, all them good things that makes a good person are Christian values. And when it comes to pride for your country, pride of your heritage, pride of where you come from, the historical things that your country has contributed to, and you see British people kind of being forced into shame about that. What's your view on that?
Well, it's a very deliberate ploy by the system to disconnect people from the values that would maybe compel them to be a bit more protective of the freedoms that this country offers. Christian values and being patriotic of where you come from instills a sense of wanting to better for your country and wanting to protect what your country stands for. And it's a ploy to make people more malleable and susceptible to the erosion and the destruction of their country. When you ask me about whether it was like a gradual journey to learning about all that's occurring, it was a sort of spiritual awakening, I would describe it as. There was something that just led me to certain topics, and the world, the deception and web of lies that is given to us through the education system and through the mainstream sources just began to unravel. And I think most people that find themselves learning what we've learned have like a similar experience. There's something higher than them that sort of guides them to this information. But I think we're at the stage now where there's a lot of people that have figured out what's going on. There's a lot of people who are quote unquote awake. We're now in a different stage where it's not enough to be awake. We now need to offer a solution. Those who are awake, if you count yourself worthy of contributing to humanity, you now need to start configuring and offering the solutions for this situation that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, this is the thing. I mean, my mom, she was always what you would call a conspiracy theorist, right? You know, from her 20s, I kind of grew up around it. And she always said to me, my generation was the generation to wake up. Your generation is the one to do something about it. And it feels really infuriating when you look around and you see, I suppose they're called Zoomers, aren't they? Or Gen Alpha, is that what it is? And they're all just, you know, like we were talking about earlier, Love Island and everything like this. And it's so infuriating because you know that it's them that it's going to impact. Just like when I see people kind of in sort of the middle-aged age bracket not battering an eyelid about the winter fuel payments being taken away from pensioners. They will be pensioners one day, and then they'll be worried. And this is what always gets me. People don't worry until it's happening to them. Same with wars. Wars going on all over the world. Always has been, always will be. But for the last 2-3 years, you can't deny it's been everywhere, and it's been more reported on, I would say. Not only is it fear-mongering, but also I think a lot of people just go, oh, well, it's not happening here, so it doesn't affect us. The Trump election was a perfect example. People say, well, why do we care what happens in America? We should care. It affects us a lot. I did want to ask you, do you have any hope at all now that Trump's got in? Do you see any major changes coming our way as a result of the election?
I think anyone who voted for Kamala is deeply indoctrinated into this sort of woke ideology and very misguided in terms of what she was going to do for the country. So I think Donald Trump's the better of the two alternatives, or the two choices, but I ultimately don't have much faith that he is operating for humanity's better interest. Unfortunately, I hope I'm wrong. I hear a lot of people in the movement sort of believe in him as being this sort of savior for humanity, and I don't buy it, because we've heard it all before. We've heard all this QAnon stuff at the beginning of the first lockdown, and supposedly the Queen, you know, the cabal had all been imprisoned, and they had all been all these wild conspiracies that Donald Trump is sort of associated with. I haven't seen anything that positive.
But what about certain figures that are associated with Donald Trump? I mean, we've got Elon Musk, we've got RFK, we've got some really significant individuals. What do you make of all of that?
I think it's a very muddy situation, and it's very difficult to tell who the well-intentioned are. I've had a lot of faith in RFK, and maybe I'm wrong. Look, I could be wrong. Maybe Donald Trump is working for humanity. Maybe we'll see some very significant steps that he makes to improve our situation. Maybe he is going to arrest the cabal and destroy the banking system, and who knows, maybe he is going to make some move humanity in a more positive direction. But I just don't personally buy it. I don't feel in my heart that he is doing that. I look at examples of presidents who have spoken out about the what the World Health Organization was doing. For example, Burundi, the president of Burundi, the president of Tanzania, very famously and courageously, may you rest in power, because that was a very courageous move when he tested the papaya. Did you remember this?
Oh, yeah, I saw a documentary on that. I watched it in a documentary where they also spoke about the president of Madagascar as well, and the president of Tanzania. He refuse lockdown measures, refuse vaccines, and basically made the World Health Organization look like a fool, and then mysteriously disappeared.
Well, not mysteriously, he died.
Well, he disappeared for a few weeks before he died, though.
Okay.
Before it came out that he died.
I look at examples like that. I look at the president of Tanzania, Burundi, and Haiti, who all spoke out against the World Health Organization and wouldn't conform to their suggestions for their country, and they all mysteriously died soon after. So I look at figures like that who don't have nowhere near as much influence or power as someone like Donald Trump, and they were willing to eliminate them. I don't see how Donald Trump would get to the stage that he's at if he was working for humanity's interest. I also look at what he done in his first presidency. He's the father of the vaccine. I don't buy it, unfortunately. I think I hope RFK will do some good. I don't know what to make of it. When RFK started endorsing Donald Trump, it sort of made me start to question his intentions a bit at that point. Maybe I'm cynical. I'm very cynical. I'm very distrusting. That's the nature of people in this, in people who are awake. We're naturally very distrusting. We're naturally inquisitive. We naturally sort of want to read deeper and understand further what's going on. So I could be cynical, but hopefully I'm proved wrong.
There was another thing that I wanted to ask you about. Obviously, you're Christian. I'm assuming.
No.
You're not Christian.
No. I was brought up in a Christian environment. My mom she doesn't subscribe to any particular sect of religion. She's just very biblically minded, and she believes in God and Jesus. So that was my upbringing, and I considered myself Christian up until probably 16, once I started to do the research that I started to do. I now consider myself spiritual. I subscribe to an understanding that we as humans are simply vessels for a higher spirit that exists outside of this earthly plane, and exists eternally in the atmosphere, and exists eternally in other realms, and we are brought into this plane to learn. This is just a school. I see Earth as a massive school for souls, and we are given the necessary lessons that we need in order to evolve and progress to the next level. So once we pass away and we reach the end of our journey in this plane, we will sort of be not necessarily judged, but our test scores will be marked, let's say. And it will be determined whether we get to go to a better place, whether we graduate and go to a higher realm, what Christians may kind of say is like a sort of heavenly figure, but I don't see it as there's this eternal heaven that we just get this one opportunity in life, and then once we die, we either go to heaven and hell, and then that's it. Don't see it like that. I don't believe in a God that would be so definitive. I don't think it's a fair system to operate like that. And I think what makes a lot more sense is that we're judged based upon our actions, and we either go to a slightly better place, slightly worse place, or really worse place. It's like just imagine, a good analogy would be, imagine we're in year 7 at the moment. We can either go on to year 8, we can go on to university if we're that smart, we can have to repeat the same year again, which I'm sort of referencing reincarnation. We can go to a lower plane. If we're a really evil person, then we get a really bad existence in our next life. That makes a lot more sense to me, and I'm pretty certain that that's what happens. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that that's what happens. Also, a lot of accounts of children recounting their past lives and knowing information they couldn't possibly know. There's a lot of different accounts of this.
Well, and just the basic fact that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only redistributed. It's a very basic fact that we're all taught in school. Personally, I'm a Christian, but I do find that really, really interesting. I really like the way that you put that, and yeah, I do think that that does make a lot of sense. Personally, obviously, I have my own views, but we won't go into that. I suppose what I wanted to ask you is about, because at the moment, kind of most of the British people are yearning for our patriotic identity back that we've kind of lost. And a lot of that is baked into Christian values. Now, a character that I've been finding really interesting lately is Nick Tenconi.
Don't know who that is.
He's the leader of the UKIP party.
Right.
But basically, he's been coming out a lot lately, talking about his Christian values, talking about the fact that we need to get back to Christian values, we need to do this. And then in his manifesto, he wants to bring back the death penalty, which in my view, people may disagree, in my view, is not Christian. There's also a lot of other people who, because we're kind of yearning for this sense of identity, do you think that it's a possibility that people are kind of be jumping on the bandwagon of, like, politicians I'm talking about, jumping on the bandwagon of, oh, I'm Christian, to kind of get people on side, and then do what, in my view, maybe Reform have done ever so slightly, and then do a bit of a U-turn twist on what we thought that they actually were?
Well, that's what politicians typically do.
Well, yeah.
They typically make promises or appeal to certain values that then, when they are given the opportunity to make political changes that reflect those promises, they don't end up usually doing that. Maybe because there's someone above them who warns them against it and it hinders their career progression. That could be a factor. So I don't trust politicians in the slightest. I don't know why people put any faith in politicians. That's my personal view. I don't know why we are trying to use a very corrupt and far gone political system to remedy our situation. I think the power is in our hands to develop our own system, and that's where all my effort is going to go. If people want to try and use the political system to remedy this situation, great. I hope they get somewhere. But from what I've seen, the people that do, like we spoke about Andrew Bridgen, don't seem to get very far. So
yeah, unfortunately, I think while people like Andrew Bridgen are held back, I think our entire political system, governmental system, is a throwaway job. Would you agree with that? Or do you think that there's any sort of retribution, anything that could be redeemable, and anything that could turn things around?
Sure. If they remove the World Health Organization from having any involvement in this country, that would be a first. If Donald Trump was to do something like that, or any political figure was to do something like that, immediately I would be like, okay, this person's actually on our side. That would be a very simple and, I don't know about easy, but a fairly straightforward thing to achieve, in terms of saying this country no longer has any involvement with the World Health Organization. That's one of the first things that I would like to see from any political figure that says they're on humanity's side.
Do you think that the UK would be better off cutting ties with all international organizations that kind of march to the beat of the same drum, so to speak?
I wouldn't say cut it all off. I wouldn't say all international organizations are ill-intentioned. I would start with the ones who most definitely are: World Economic Forum, World Health Organization. I would start with those, and then we can maybe start researching or consulting the public more on which organizations the public want the UK to be involved with, because I don't remember ever being consulted as a citizen of this country whether the World Health Organization should be involved in our politics. I don't remember having to vote on that. I don't remember having to elect the Bill Gates or the World Health Organization to be involved in anything, let alone the drastic impositions on our daily lives and freedoms. So that's maybe where we start if anyone in the political sphere wants to begin resolving the situation that we're in, remove the World Health Organization, remove the World Economic Forum, and then we can maybe start trusting you.
Have you got any events coming up that you'd like to tell the viewers about?
So I've got 3 Instagram pages that I would like to promote. If you want to see the story of stand-up from the beginning, then check out StandUp.x. That is the journey of the freedom movement. We sort of use it as a means to share mainstream articles. That we use mainstream articles because there's a lot of censorship, and if we use mainstream articles, we kind of avoid that. So if you want to see a collection of information or interesting articles that should get you thinking, and you can maybe present to someone who isn't quite aware of what's going on, StandUp.x would be a great start. I've got the People's Platform. The People's Platform is the other project that I'm working on, which is the system for the freedom movement to begin having a function for collective input. You can see the beginning stages of that on the People's Platform Instagram. We have a collection of individuals on the People's Platform from every walk of life, every industry, every profession, all giving their perspective on what's going on. And I think that is a good foundation for us to build on in terms of building our own system of democracy. And then I've also got my own Instagram channel, which I've started recently, which just allows me to be a lot more personal with my journey. I do a lot of public interactions. I do a lot of public engagement. I do a lot of surveys. I go out on the megaphone, for example. I'll go to a council estate in my area and just start preaching on the megaphone, then go door to door and present people information. So I'm very active in terms of trying to further our cause and bridge into the public. So yeah, check out those Instagram pages if you want to know more about what I'm doing.
Okay, well, it's been really nice having you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emma. It's been lovely.
Thank
Great
you.
conversation.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
it.
For more exclusive behind-the-scenes content, please be sure to subscribe to our Patreon. It really helps us cover the cost of any live streams, events, protests, or anything that we do. You'll also be seeing any behind-the-scenes footage and anything that we might be doing with Defiance Records.
Resistance GB's new series, 1,000 Words, has me, portrait artist Jake Fern, talking to some of the key figures in the movement. Half my brain concentrating on having a conversation, and the other half on making a painting. Do I succeed at either? You be the judge.